you want to go first?
Who starts?
Why do you vote, Mama?
I vote because it's really important that my voice is heard.
It is a privilege that my great-grandmother and her mother did not have.
If I'm not voting, then no one's thinking about my issues.
Access to health care, police violence, immigration reform,
Environmental issues.
Access to affordable housing, gendered violence against women, queer, trans, and non-binary people of color.
All these policies personally affect me.
I am so inspired by this young, beautiful lady sitting next to me because she is informed.
I look at women like her, and they were the ones who taught me to speak up for myself.
We're beginning to see that we do make a difference. Voting is the way to do it.
Every woman, please vote for yourself and for your sisters.
YWCA is on a mission to eliminate racism and empower women.
Tu voz, tu voto, tu futuro.
Your voice, your vote,
Your future.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Alejandra Castillo, and I'm the CEO of YWCA USA, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you this morning. I have the most amazing, sometimes challenging, but always rewarding job in the world, working day in and day out, side by side with YWCA incredible network of leaders across the country. You'll find a YWCA in almost every state, including one right up the block. And I want to thank Monica Gray, who is here this morning, who is the leader of the YWCA of National Capital. So thank you, Monica, for always being supportive and being part of our amazing network. For over 160 years, I'd say for 160 years, YWCA has been meeting the health, safety, empowerment, and economic advancement needs of women, girls, and families. And we've been boldly advocating for programs and policies to advance racial justice and civil rights in this country. As part of YWCA's National Civic Engagement Initiative to inform, register, and mobilize women across the country, and to ensure that women's issues are at the forefront of policy discussion, we are proud to partner with Lake Research Partners and American Viewpoint in releasing What Women Want 2018, a new report which shares the results of a national survey of American women. It's critical that women's concerns and priorities are raised, heard, and understood by women, by our allies, and by our policymakers, particularly during this pivotal period for civic engagement. And as Celinda Lake and Bob Carpenter will share with you in just a moment, the findings of this report delve into deep areas of concern and priorities. As an organization with an intersectional mission, eliminating racism and empowering women, and an organization-wide commitment to fostering young women in leadership, we've included in this effort a specific focus on the voices of Black, Latina, Asian American, Native American, and millennial women. We are also incredibly pleased to have here with us key leaders in the women's community and in the civil rights community, who are partners in advancing equity and justice for women and people of color. We're honored that so many are standing with us today. These past days and weeks have been crystal clear that women matter and their voices must be heard, that our voices, concerns, priorities matter, that we are powerful when we stand together. And the headlines here today is that women across perceived differences of race, ethnicity, age, and political affiliation overwhelmingly agree on legislative agendas that put our concerns and our priorities at the center. We are powerful when we stand together, and we are standing together here today. The concerns and priorities that we heard are in our new Your Voice, Your Vote, Your Future PSA. And that you'll learn more about in this report from the leaders who will speak here today. The concern and priority are about why women vote. And with that, I want to thank all of you who joined us this morning, but I also have a request, and that request is take this survey, look at the headlines, look at those issues that are critical to advancing women and to advancing racial justice, but use it, disseminate it, amplify it. Let's have a conversation, let's have a discussion. But at the end of the day, the request is one that's very simple. The reason this country is as special as it is, and as a daughter of immigrants, I can tell you, we come to this great country to serve, to make it better, but also because it has the promise of democracy. And that democracy is only manifested when we vote. So I want to make sure that we are sending the message that civic engagement, civic participation is a duty that we all have, but most importantly, that we also have to raise and amplify those issues that touch our lives. I am delighted to welcome Celinda Lake from Lake Research Partners and Bob Carpenter from American Viewpoint to share more details about this survey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's really a great privilege to be here as part of this study and part of this research team. And I really want to thank Alejandra and her team for their great visionary leadership. And I also want to thank the group for the YWCA for their mission for 160 years, but their commitment even in research to be sure to represent the voices of all women. And it's very, to do what I would call not oversampling, but appropriate sampling, and to include voices that are often excluded, like Asian American Pacific Islanders, Native American women, as well as millennial African American and Latinas. So this is a very exciting study. It's 1,038 women that were talked to just a month ago, and the error on the sample is plus or minus 3%. So we're women, right? So we have the ability to be worried about lots of things at once. So asking women what they're worried about is always amusing because women are worried about lots of things. But this year they are particularly intensely concerned about safety from gun violence, medical expenses for themselves and their families that they cannot afford, having affordable and secure health insurance, and of course, health care is the #1 issue in most of the federal elections this year, and caregiving for an aging relative, which is an issue that is surging onto the agenda. And you'll be fascinated to find that millennial women have this as one of their top concerns. The priorities for Congress come straight out of the values that women have and the concerns that they have. But there's a very, very broad role for Congress. Women have not given up on Congress, unlike men who think it's a good day when Congress doesn't do anything bad. Women still believe in a role for government, and they have deep priorities across this agenda. Many of these things that are priorities for women aren't really even transactional policies. They are so strongly held that they verge on what we would call core values, valence issues, equal pay, and VAWA being two of the things that emerge as core values for women. And you will see this very, very powerful linkage in terms of priorities, linking economics with healthcare, with caregiving, and with gun and sexual violence and criminal violence. Women also are very, very focused on criminal justice and civil rights. And you will see some astounding numbers in terms of discrimination, both racial, gender, and sex discrimination in a moment. So the experts all say that the economy is in recovery, and women say, glad you're talking to us and not those so-called experts, because women are very, very worried about economic issues. The agenda has shifted from jobs to cost of living and what those jobs pay, but there is a very strong nexus of kitchen table issues in terms of medical expenses, affordable insurance, affordable housing, rent and mortgage, paid family and medical leave, and family income not being able to keep up with just basic expenses and bills. And with those economic concerns on their minds, women are turning again to strengthening equal pay laws, expanding access to affordable health care, quality child care, protecting the Affordable Care Act, and passing paid and family leave. Discrimination has been a long focus of the YWCA. And this has been a very, very powerful intersectionality. Particularly, I want to acknowledge Alejandra's leadership in this. 2 in 5 women report experiencing discrimination because they are women. That's a 9% increase from 2012 when we did this survey for the Y before. African American, Latina, Asian Pacific Islander women experience racial discrimination at even higher rates than gender discrimination. And Latinas and Native American women have particularly experienced an increase recently in race discrimination. Women are concerned about safety. And at the core of that concern is sexual and domestic violence, sexual harassment, and discrimination. And again, you don't have to talk about intersectionality with women. Women get that things are connected. And these attitudes are highly correlated, and highly correlated with women wanting to take action in terms of a legislative and congressional agenda as well. Women worry about being sexually harassed at work. Now, this is not a question of, do you think it happens? Because over 80% of women think it happens. Have you experienced in the past? This is immediate concern about sexual harassment at work today. And you see almost a third of women and even more millennials immediately concerned about that issue. Gun violence is also a very strong issue for women. It is particularly strong among millennials, but very strong among African American and Latina women as well. And gun violence, as we all know, related to a strong safety agenda for women, as we've seen in other work that other folks have done. Healthcare, as I said, the leading issue in today's world in these elections. And you're seeing it at the state and local level as well as at the federal level. And that's based on women having deep concerns about medical expenses, affordable care, and secure insurance, and protecting as well as improving the Affordable Care Act. One of the things I love about polling is that conventional wisdom is usually wrong about 95% of the time, plus or minus 5%. And Beltway conventional wisdom is usually wrong about 100% of the time, plus or minus 5%. So everyone knows that reproductive health care is extremely controversial issue, right? Very polarized, not well supported. Everyone knows that except for women themselves. Women across the board strongly supportive of reproductive health care, including contraception and abortion care, and women across race and age strongly focused on protecting Roe v. Wade, and Republican women support protecting Roe v. Wade. We also see, again, the nexus, and for everything, things are connected for women. Physical and mental health needs of women and girls, a major concern as well. We also saw the rise of concern with the opioid crisis, where women again are the leaders, and women across the board, urban and rural settings, very concerned about the opioid crisis. So if that's the summary, let me show you some of the data about the worries, and then Bob will talk to you about the solutions. So here you see the blue numbers are the numbers of women who are concerned about something, and this is, the dark blue is very worried about it. Keeping you and your family safe from gun violence, 64% concerned about that, 44% very concerned. And what's really important about these numbers, this is not about being concerned for the society. This is not about thinking this issue is important. This is about you personally being worried about this and we're getting numbers that are this high. Same with medical insurance, caring for aging relatives. This is an issue that has really soared on the agenda. This is the issue of the next decade, being able to care for your spouse, parents, or other relatives as they age. Right behind that is access to paid family and medical leave, housing affordability. On a second tier, but still very important, family income, getting a good paying job, paying for student loans, someone in your household losing their job. But remember, it's the money that things cost right now that is of even bigger concern to people than actually losing their job. People think they can get several poor paying jobs right now, but it's having a job that's actually sustainable for a family. Affordable and dependable child care, having good work-family balance, being sexually harassed on the job. 32% of women say they are worried about themselves today being sexually harassed on the job, and then having a flexible schedule. Healthcare, a huge issue for people across the board, including reproductive health care, opioid, mental health services. As I said, women have the ability to be worried about more than one thing at a time. Keeping you and your family safe from police violence. Notice 47% of African American women and 32% of Latinas say they personally worry about that. And having a family member deported, 25% say they are worried about that. Immigration issues among Latinas. Immigration issues also a very big concern among millennials and a very big concern about Asian American Pacific Islander women. Healthcare for white women, healthcare and gun safety are the two top issues. For African American women, keeping your family safe from police violence and medical expenses. For Latinas are worried about everything, but very, very strongly concerned about medical expenses, gun violence, and being able to care for aging family and parents. And interestingly, Latinas start worrying about that at the ripe old age of 23. Asian Pacific Islander women worried about gun violence. No one talks about this concern and medical experiences. And Native American women, paid family and medical leave, a huge issue in the Native American community, and often that voice not talked about enough. Affordable health care and gun violence. And finally, millennials, our future. The biggest voting bloc in 2020 will be millennials. Gun safety, caring for aging relatives, affordable health insurance, affordable housing, and of course, repaying those college loans. Finally, we see women having tremendous experience with discrimination. 41% say that they have experienced sex discrimination. Another 27% say they have experienced racial or ethnicity discrimination. Notice that women of color, all stronger in terms of having experienced discrimination as a woman, except for Asian American Pacific Islanders, who are at the average, and then all women of color saying that they have experienced racial discrimination and experiencing, if you're Black, Latino, or Asian American Pacific Islander, at even higher rates than race or ethnicity. Discrimination as a woman increased, discrimination in terms of race increasing, and discrimination in terms of religion increasing among women, including Native American women being very concerned about discrimination based on religion. So if that's the context, let's talk about the solution, and I'll turn it over to Bob.
Thank you, Celinda, and I want to echo her comments and thanks to the YWCA for their leadership in these areas. She mentioned that Republican women support protecting Roe v. Wade, as this Republican man does. And thank you. And how appropriate that we're talking about these issues on the first day of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So congratulations for doing that. Let me get into some of the legislative solutions. There's broad and deep support among women for all the policies that were tested in this survey, and you can see the numbers there. Agreement is very intense when it comes to equal pay, violence against women, and passing the Child Care for Working Families Act. When I see numbers like this, I think of most candidates who would love to have 55% of the vote. We're in the 80s and 90s I mean, what candidate wouldn't love to have 80 or 90% of the vote? So when you see numbers this strong, not just the total agreement, but the strongly agree numbers, these are truly, truly off the charts in terms of high, high numbers of women agreeing with all of these. In a slightly second tier would be health care, protecting the Affordable Care Act, passing paid family and medical leave, protecting Roe v. Wade, and passing legislation to meet the physical and mental health needs of women and girls. And then we get into a tier of immigration-related items. Still very, very strong agreement for... I'm sorry. As Celinda said, women can multitask. I can only do one thing at a time. Thank you. And then we get into the immigration tier, which is still very, very strong. Majority strongly support each of these items, and you can see in the high 60s and 70s in terms of total agreement. Looking at those issues by ethnicity and age, you can see again the numbers for all women, very, very high numbers for African American women across these issues of equal pay, renewing the Violence Against Women Act, and passing child care for working families, as well as ending racial profiling. And important to me is looking at the red at the bottom, where you see the numbers for Republican women. Strengthening equal pay, 80% agree. Renewing the Violence Against Women Act, 79% agree. Passing child care for working families, 76% agree. And passing legislation to end racial profiling, 63%. Very, very strong numbers among Republican women for each of these issues. And it's incumbent on the YWCA and others to deliver this message to all the Republican men on the Hill who ignore these issues at their own electoral peril. Strong numbers as well among the various age groups, 60s and 70s, total agreement. So again, very strong numbers. And again, thinking back on what candidate wouldn't love to have 80% of the vote. Women again, across race and age cohorts strongly agree that Congress should act on health and caregiving issues. You can see the numbers there. Very strong among African American women and Latinas in terms of protecting ACA, passing paid family medical leave, protecting Roe v. Wade, and passing legislation for physical and mental health needs. Again, very, very strong numbers, not just among African American and Latina women, but across women of all ethnicity as well as all age. And again, there at the bottom, strong support among Republican women for each of these. 61% agree protecting the Affordable Care Act, 72% passing paid family medical leave, 54% protecting Roe v. Wade, as Celinda mentioned earlier. 54% of women agree that Roe v. Wade of Republican women agree that Roe v. Wade should be protected, and 65% passing legislation for physical and mental health care needs. You can see the strong numbers there, but again, very, very high numbers in terms of total agreement. When we get into the immigration tier, 3/4 of Latinas support all of the immigration policies surveyed. They want to see Congress act. You can see there the high 70s and 80% for each of those policies, ending family separation at the border, passing the DREAM Act, passing immigration reform, and ending detention of immigrant women and children. Again, strong numbers among Republican women for each of those, and strong numbers among each of the age groups that are delineated there. Again, I would call your attention to even when there's 51, 56, think of that in terms of the electoral, what candidate wouldn't love to have 56% of the vote? We, just very briefly, so you can see who we talked to, the demographics of the women that were surveyed, all women, no men, of course. You can see the various age groups, the education, party identification, etc. That's really just for contextual purposes. When we look at the subgroup analysis, women of different races have different experiences, and there are some important nuances by those different racial and ethnic groups. Closer look at African American women. Top concerns are medical expenses and keeping families themselves and their families safe from gun violence. You'll see that among other ethnic groups as well. Black women are more likely than other subgroups to be worried about keeping themselves safe, as I mentioned, and then you can see the other issues that are of importance to them. Black women experience racial discrimination at higher rates than they experience discrimination because of their gender. And black women want to see Congress take action on strengthening equal pay laws, renewing the Violence Against Women Act, and passing legislation that ends racial profiling. Many of the same issues among Latina women. Their top concern are having a medical expense that they cannot afford, keeping their families safe from gun violence, themselves and their families safe from gun violence, the same among African American women. More likely than other subgroups to be worried about being able to afford their rent or mortgage, being able to care for their relatives as they age, and you can see the other issues that this subgroup is more worried about than other subgroups. Latinas experience racial discrimination at higher rates than they experience discrimination because of their gender, again, similar to African American women. Latinas want to see Congress take action on strengthening equal pay laws and renewing the Violence Against Women Act. When we look at Asian and Pacific Islander women, their top concern, again, keeping themselves and their families safe from gun violence. You're seeing that across all ethnic groups. And having a medical expense that they cannot afford. They're more likely than other subgroups to be worried about keeping their families safe from gun violence and being sexually harassed on the job. Excuse me, Asian and Pacific Islander women experience racial discrimination at higher rates than they experience discrimination because they're a woman. So again, we're seeing the racial over gender, and they want to see Congress take action on strengthening equal pay laws and passing legislation that ends racial profiling. And finally, looking at Native American women, their top concerns are having access to paid family and medical leave. They're more likely than other subgroups to be worried about having that access. About half of Native American women say they've experienced prejudice or discrimination because they're a woman and because of their race or ethnicity. So unlike the other women's groups, this is the first time we're seeing an equal amount of discrimination, which is not the best way to put that, but I think you get the point. Native American women are more likely than other groups of women to say they experience age and religious discrimination, as well as discrimination because of their ethnicity and their gender. Native American women want to see Congress take action on strengthening equal pay laws, passing the Child Care for Working Families Act, renewing Violence Against Women. And then taking a look at millennial women, their top concern, again, keeping themselves and their families safe from gun violence. That's a pattern across all of these subgroups. Secondary concerns are being able to care for their spouses, parents, or other relatives as they age. And as somebody who's moving into that older age group, I'm glad to see that unfortunately I don't have any daughters, but hopefully my sons will pick up on this and take care of me as I age. Millennial women are more likely than older cohorts to experience discrimination because they are women and because of their race or ethnicity. So we're seeing that same pattern among millennials that we saw among Native American women. Millennial women want to see Congress take action on strengthening equal pay laws, renewing the Violence Against Women Act, and passing legislation that ends racial profiling. So those are both the findings and the actions that these 1,038 women want to see Congress and others take.
So you see, our intent was to have a survey that was not just national in scope, but also included the voices of women from every walk of life, ethnicity, and age. So thank you both Celinda and Bob for providing us with those top line findings. And again, I put the call out that these are findings that I hope that you will continue to use, cite, amplify, because we need to make sure that the voices of all women are raised, particularly as it relates to the issues that are of great concern. I mentioned before that we have a very wonderful lineup of partners who are standing with us today. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Catherine Lhamon to the podium, Chair of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. Catherine.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you to YWCA, and thank you for this excellent survey set of results. It's incredibly distressing to see these data, and I want to share with you that the concerns, the civil rights concerns, reflected in these survey results are consistent with what I see as the chair of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. And they are, therefore, I hope, a call to action for all of us. They demand action. In particular, the survey results about discrimination lowlight for us the sobering reality that we are not living the equality that we deserve. One ray of hope from these data, and I will say that I struggle to find one, but one ray of hope from these data is that they give us a clear path to the possible for ways to overcome that discrimination and to move forward to correct the distressing regularity with which too many women among us experience discrimination. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, which I chair, is in the middle of taking several steps that are responsive to these survey data. In particular, this year, we are investigating the civil rights enforcement across the Trump administration, across all of the federal civil rights agencies. And that investigation, we hope, will yield a set of recommendations for effective federal civil rights policy that will be responsive to specifically the concerns that are bipartisan and reflected in these survey data. In addition, the Commission is addressing some of the specific sub-issues of discrimination that came up in very distressing ways in this data. For example, the concerns about sexual harassment in employment that are current today for too many American women. The Commission has voted to address federal workplace sexual harassment and what government is doing to redress it. So we look forward to that investigation and hope that we will see robust participation among those present today in it. The Commission also is going to release a report next month about police use of force, and the survey data here about women's experience of concern about police use of force and police violence in their lives and in their families' lives is an ugly reminder of the need for taking aim at this problem and also taking important corrective action. So I want to say that in addition to these steps that the Commission itself is taking to address the kinds of discrimination concerns reflected in these data, I hope all of us take the actions that we can across our dinner tables, in our workplaces, in our daily lives to confront, address, and redress the equality harms that diminish us as citizens, and I thank the YWCA for shining a spotlight on this need.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and you put it so beautifully, a path to the possible. It is challenging when you see so much of this data that can feel dark, but the path to the possible is the fact that we're working very collectively with not just government or a nonprofit organization, civil rights advocates, but also philanthropy. And I'm delighted to welcome to the podium Teresa Younger, President and CEO of the Ms. Foundation for Women. Thank you.
Well, I have to say congratulations to the YWCA and thank you to Alejandra for her leadership in moving this report forward. I'm Teresa Younger, President and CEO of the Ms. Foundation for Women, the oldest and first public women's foundation in the world. It is our pleasure to be in partnership with the YWCA as they talk about these issues and stand behind what they have done in this report. So thank you both to Celinda and Bob for really taking the step forward to identify those voices who are oftentimes forgotten when we are talking about women. Because when we close our eyes, we oftentimes still think about the blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman and not about the women who have pigmentation shades going on in their skin levels. And our experiences are slightly different than other women, and they need to be called out and addressed. When I read the report, I was instantly thought and struck by the words of Audre Lorde, who said, "There is no thing as a single issue struggle because we do not lead single issue lives." And I believed as I read the report and I reflected on it, that is exactly what this reflected. Women in this country, particularly women of color, do not get the option to just worry about our safety or the safety of our families over our health care or the ability to pay our bills and make ends meet at the end of the day. We know that to be true. All of these issues affect us. So what women want in 2018 is a very simple question with a very complex answer, because we are not monolithic in what we need or what we want or where we want to go. What we want is full equality. What we want is full equity. What we want is to make sure that our voices are heard in formulating the solutions that will address the oppressive, systemic, sexist, and misogynistic problems that have been given to us. And I believe this report gives very, very clear direction for what we need to do. Very simple things that, in all honesty, if the men would listen, we will help lead the way. We are talking about, right, renewing VAWA, protecting Roe v. Wade, defending and ending family separation and detention, supporting equal pay, and ending racial profiling as the tops of those things that women and women of color have told us are so critical. If we want to see and aspire to the best democracy that we talk about, that we aspire to, that ending racism and empowering women will get us to, then we absolutely must believe in, trust, respect, and acknowledge the voices of women and women of color moving forward. And in partnership with the YWCA and those who do the research to support it and those in this room, I know that we can get to the greater democracy, and I really appreciate these reports. And the reality is that philanthropy, government, and private institution all have roles to play. And at the Ms. Foundation for Women, as we center the voices of women and girls of color, we are here to be part of that solution. Thank you. I almost forgot my partners in philanthropy. Sorry about that. I'd like to invite up to the podium the CEO of Hispanics in Philanthropy, Nancy Negron.
Thank you very much. And although I'd like the promotion, I'm actually the vice president, but thank you very much. And as Hispanics in Philanthropy, we're really proud to be here with the YWCA today with this really important report. All of us know that women of color are leading the way right now. Everyone except maybe Congress. So this is incredibly important that we take this moment to think about what's happened in the past year and the voices that have been lifted up and those that still need to be lifted up. So Hispanics in Philanthropy in particular, it is very important for us to stay engaged in the civic engagement conversation that's happening across the country. It's not just about the 56.5 million Latinos in the country, but it's about the diversity that exists within our community has been largely ignored. And what we've seen in the past year in terms of the violation of very human civil rights, it's more important for us than ever to be engaged in this conversation. And it's thrilling to have not just important data points about women, but about women of color in this country and where we are and what we worry about. Some of the things were not so surprising. We stay up late at night, those of us that are women in the room. This is the stuff we worry about. I worry all the time about my boys driving while brown, right? Driving while black, going to the stores on their own late at night, wanting to do the basic things that a teenager wants to do, and you stay up at night and you worry about it. And that's what this is about. This is about what keeps us up at night and what will motivate us to register not just those around us, but our communities to vote. So Hispanics in Philanthropy has engaged in a series of mini grants around this issue, around the country, to support nonprofits in their goal to register men and women to vote, but in the Latino community very specifically. We oftentimes make this push around election time for getting out the vote and activities to register people to vote, but we don't always support the nonprofits in our community that have the tentacles on the ground to do the work. So it's really important for us at Hispanics in Philanthropy to make sure we're empowering the nonprofits that work with our communities day and night to have the dollars they need to just educate. Educate, go door to door, and find our community members where they are and support them in their goal to exercise their right to vote. Over the next few months, weeks really, you're going to see more and more ads targeting certain constituents. I mean, at the end of the day, what they're finally figuring out is that about a third of the entire Hispanic population that's born in the US are under the age of 18. For the next 20 years, we will have 1 million Latinos eligible to vote. 20 years. So they're starting now. I don't know if you saw the most recent headlines. It's like every day there's a headline about the Latinos in Florida or this constituency group here or there. And there is a fight out there for who's going to win that vote. But until people listen to what our issues are, no one deserves it. So really it's about us making sure that we educate our community members about the importance of exercising their right to vote, but about the issues that are brought up in this study. So as partners to the YWCA, I just want to say thank you again. As a Latina, this is one fight that's going to go on for the next 20 years. So thank you all very much for your support, and we will continue to help wherever we can. Thank you. And I messed up. See, Teresa, there you go. And it is my pleasure to introduce a former colleague and a now senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, Jocelyn Frye.
Good morning. It's terrific to be here. Thank you, Alejandra, for inviting me, and thank you to the YWCA for your leadership. And thank you to Celinda and Bob for the research. I think, as other people have alluded to, there's a lot in here that's distressing, perhaps not surprising because we know it, but it's really important to lift it up. And I want to focus on a couple of pieces that are particularly relevant to the work of the Center for American Progress, and I know are relevant to the work of many in this room. And that is about the centrality of women to our nation's economic agenda. It is often the case that we treat women as sort of an afterthought when we talk about the economy. We talk about, we get the right people on TV, or at least what they perceive to be the right people. They're most often men. Not that there's anything wrong with men. We love men, but they are not the only people who think about the economy. And then usually as an afterthought, they have a nice conversation to the side about women's economic issues. And what we know from the data is that women are should be a central part of the economic conversation because they are a central part of the economic stability of their families. And people I know have heard the data. Women, particularly mothers, or 2/3 of those mothers are breadwinners. And I think another piece of that data, this is really important, is that for women of color, that's even more true. If you look at Black women and Latinas, they're far more likely to be breadwinners. Over 70% of Black women are either the primary or sole breadwinner, or Black mothers are the primary or sole breadwinners for their families. Over 40% of Latinas are, Latina mothers are primary or sole breadwinners. So for women of color in particular, having an economy that works for them is really central, not only for them personally, but also for their families. And so I think what it means is not only that women need to be a central part of the economic agenda, but it's also true that equality has to be a central part of our economic agenda. And so the other piece that I wanted to pull up and point to in particular was the focus on equal pay. What we know, the one thing that we know for the last 25 years is that women say say across the board that equal pay matters. And it is striking that outside of our former president, that we largely have not made progress on that issue. And it should be a top priority. The concept of equal pay for equal work is not new, and it should be something that we have a consensus on in terms of moving forward legislatively. And it is particularly important to incorporate into that conversation, as we talk about concrete policy, the intersectional lens. Because even some of the policy ideas that we push forward, if they're not also focusing on the unique racial and ethnic disparities, we're also not getting at the problem. So I just wanted to lift up those pieces and wanted to thank the YWCA for their leadership in this space and look forward to working with them. And with that, I will hand it over to another colleague, Liz Copeland, who is the founder and president of the Urban Conservative Project.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here. So I'm here today not as a Republican, not as a political strategist or a commentator. I'm here because before all of those titles, I'm a woman. I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, a sorority sister. And for a very long time, I didn't think I could say this in public, but I'm a feminist. And I'm here because that the policies that provide access to affordable health care and keeping our families safe from gun violence are inherently nonpartisan issues and worthy of every woman's attention, certainly mine. The Urban Conservative Project is a fairly new advocacy organization, and we strive to represent the voices of conservatives in cities. And we support moderate Republicans running for local and state office, oftentimes along the major, the Northeast corridor where there is a large, strong Democratic hold. We focus on education, tax, and public benefits reform. In America, 40% of people consider themselves moderates, and 36% of them consider themselves conservatives. That combined is clearly more than the 25% who would say that they are liberal, and 48% say that they are fiscal conservatives. But when I founded the organization, it was because I wanted to give a voice to those people who often were afraid to speak up. And I found that voice because of strong women that spoke out before me, and because of organizations like the YWCA that created a safe environment for me to do so. Recently, there was a CBS poll that said women trust the Democratic Party 2-to-1 over the Republican Party on women's issues. And 15% of Republicans said that they choose a man over a woman. Let's think about that. 85% of them polled said they would choose a man. At least half of them were women. And so the Republican Party has a lot of work to do. As a conservative of color, I'm often a racial minority in my political community and a political minority in my racial and ethnic communities. And while I may not have experienced blatant racism within the party, I have been observant of the people in the room, mostly white, mostly men. And as you know, the Republican Party often cannibalizes its candidates during the primary. You have to go very, very right in order to even make it to the general. So what does that mean? The issues that are in the report today are often not discussed. They're often not even brought up. And that is because the conversation can be dominated by those white men I referred to earlier. It's important for moderate voices like me to have the support of women like you. And it's important for data that's found in the report to be shared by Republican women like me with Republican legislators on the Hill and in our state houses. I know I painted a grim picture of the party that I'm in, but I'm not leaving. I believe communities of color deserve not only representation in both parties, but power. I'm a constitutionalist. The Urban Conservative Project supports access to your guns, but we support changes in law that increase the age to acquire high-power rifles. As you saw in the report, we want our families to be safe. While I don't agree with all of the policy statements or the actions taken by Black Lives Matter organization, my father, who was in the armed forces, is Black. My sons and my daughter, they're Black, and their lives matter. Legislation that holds bad cops accountable and protects the constitutional rights of all people are important. So I could go on and on, but my point is that my political party association should not prevent these types of conversations. And I'm so happy and thankful that I was invited today. I want to continue this conversation. I challenge those in the room that if you'd like conservative organizations like mine that are moderate in nature but strongly supporting of women's issues, reach out to us, and we should reach out and will reach out to you. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to introduce the next speaker, Christine Chen, Founding Executive Director of Asian and Pacific Island American Vote.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Alejandra and YWCA for your leadership. I was so excited to hear about this poll, and that included Asian American. Many times we're not part of the conversation because the data is not there, and we're the fastest growing population. Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote is a national organization focusing on increasing voter registration and voter participation and civic participation of Asian American Pacific Islanders on the local, state, and federal level. We currently work in 27 states with local partners in the community who are trusted messengers and who are already a part of the infrastructure of this community. In addition, we work on 40 different campuses. Already this year, we've seen a lot more increased excitement. We were requested to implement 18 regional trainings because more organizations and AAPI leaders were interested, even though they weren't engaged in 2016, they are in 2018. They wanted to learn how to actually do this work. Last week, the nation celebrated National Voter Registration Day with this national holiday. Already, preliminary numbers are showing that there's increased numbers than we've ever seen during midterm elections. And that was really exciting to see also that Asian American Pacific Islander organizations, more nonprofits were involved with that effort this year than ever before. In Nevada, they've already hit over like 5,000 registrations, which is a lot more than they ever have done. And we've seen a lot more of infrastructure and resources being poured into different states and regions where there's a larger API population, such as Nevada, Minnesota, Virginia, New Jersey, Georgia itself, because of the special elections, as well as all the different primaries. We've seen Asian American Pacific Islander voters come out where typically they have not been engaged with that. And it's been really exciting to see that campaigns are also looking to reach out to this population. So for API Vote, we're here to really transform this electorate in terms of increasing the voter registration rates, but also transforming them into regular voters. Now as we go into the next phase after voter registration, we are dedicated and focusing on sending out mailers in 9 different languages. So API Vote is making sure that, especially for those who are limited English proficient, have the assistance that they need, especially if they're first-time voters or if they are traditionally vote only during presidential years, and this is a new process for them. In addition, we also host a 888 API Vote hotline, where during this time period, we also increase, answer questions that they may have. Turning to this poll, for me, actually, we're not surprised about the polling results, especially when it comes to gun control. Back in 2016, when we did conduct a survey, 77% of Asian Americans felt that gun control was an extremely and very important issue for them. And then even preliminary results in the next 7 to 10 days, we'll be releasing an additional poll for 2018. And preliminarily, out of 600, those who are polled, 86% of women said that gun control was extremely and very important. So that's almost a 10-point increase from 2016. Also, whether it's healthcare or racial profiling, racial discrimination, we've seen that continue to be a big issue in the last 2 years, just because the amount of activity of civic engagement and going out to rallies from our community, which I've never seen in previous years. The National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, one of our partners, focuses on reproductive rights and equal pay day, and they've been mobilizing this year around those particular issues. Well, one thing I want to go ahead and re-emphasize is that I'm hoping that the media, as well as the political parties, really focus on this poll and the data, because back in 2016, 72% of AAPI women said that they were never contacted by either party. So with that, I would like to go ahead and introduce Vicki Shabo, who's with the National Partnership for Women and Families. Thank you.
Good morning. I want to thank Alejandra as well, and also the YWCA for being such a community institution. I think we see time and again that having bricks and mortar where people can come together and get the services that they need is critically important, especially in these really, really difficult times. Thanks also to Bob and to Celinda for this fantastic data. At the National Partnership for Women and Families, we're based here in Washington, D.C., and we focus on healthcare, racial and economic justice, reproductive rights, and workplace fairness. And so the data here really speak to every one of the priorities that we work on and the importance of building partnerships across communities, across the country, across constituencies to try to improve lives for women and families. We've all been through what last week was tremendously painful and difficult to watch, and just a reminder of the sexism, the racism, the violence. These last 22 months, every week, it feels like there's a new thing that just keeps us under siege. And for many of us, it's been a huge wake-up call. But for others, those who are living in vulnerable communities, in vulnerable households, people working in low-wage jobs where they have no power and where they have no voice, this is just the realities of lives. And I think we are all now feeling much of what so many people in so many communities, women of color in particular, have felt for so long. I think one of the powerful things about this is women coming together, communities coming together to try to make change. And what this data show is that there is power in these priorities and in the unity that we should be holding hands to affect right now. It's really, really easy in these times to be in a trap of reactivity, to feel the outrage and the despair. But what I think this data show, and I could feel that outrage and despair in myself as I was looking at this, is that it is time to really double down on making change. Change doesn't have to be far off. The change that the women in these surveys and many others articulate is that this is an agenda, again, of moving the country forward, of moving women forward, of reinstituting maybe hope in ourselves, in our communities, and potentially in our government, to try to address issues like equal pay, like violence against women, like gun violence, like paid family and medical leave. The work that we do at the National Partnership on Health and Reproductive Rights and Workplace Issues, at their core, are really about women across the lifespan, recognizing that people need control over their bodily autonomy. They need to be able to decide whether and when to have children, which jobs to enter, and how to have the security that they need to stay in the workforce while they're still providing care to themselves and to their loved ones, to get the health care that they need to be healthy, to thrive, and to be able to support themselves and their families. Our priorities as we head forward are absolutely defending the ACA and making healthcare access more equitable, firmly defending Roe and preventing these lies that ground so many state and local reproductive rights and justice laws from taking effect and trying to turn the tide, and winning better workplace policies, equal pay, paid family and medical leave, fighting back against harassment and against gender discrimination in the workplace. These are the things that will help us all thrive and move forward in the future. I think November is an important time for change. We see a record number of women who are running, a record number of women who are participating in the civic process, and a record number of women who can hold elected officials accountable as we move forward to really try to put into effect the agenda that this research says that women, whoever they are, want. So thank you so much, and I'll turn it back to Alejandra.
Such amazing speakers. Very grateful to the partners, Catherine Lhamon, Teresa Younger, Nancy Negron, Jocelyn Frye, Christine Chen, and Vicki Shabo. I'm very excited because we often say that information is power. We have just given you an amazing opportunity, a platform for information so that you can now bring our collective voices to exercise that power. And that power is not just as we move towards election time this November, but let's remember, there are elections every year in this country. Everything from school board members to members of the state legislature, Congress, and obviously the White House. But I also want to give a quick shout out to two other individuals in the room, Angela Manso from Naleo and Delia Garcia from Reflect Us. We have many, many partners, and this journey is not one that we are going to walk alone, but that we want to walk together with sister organizations. YWCA, 160 years. Very few organizations get to say that they have stood at the forefront of policy issues for 160 years, uninterruptedly. And indeed, we do have those physical structures, those convening places, those centers for communities where people can come together, not just to receive the services that we provide, but also to build a sense of community. And in these times, we need a sense of community in order to keep our country thriving. I want to thank again Celinda Lake and Bob Carpenter for the tremendous work that you've done. And I also want to give an amazing shout out to Catherine Bean and the team, because my job is the easy part, but the work that Catherine Bean and the team of policy and advocacy has done, you all got many emails throughout the night, but it takes a lot of work to put this together. But the work doesn't stop here. We want to make sure that we are amplifying this, that we are citing this, and that we are saying, as Liz Copeland said, and thank you for those true words, that we can really take this information to both sides of the aisle. Because in order for us to be the America that we all dream of, we have to come together as one. And with that, I want to open it up for some questions, which this is a pretty interesting crowd. So I'm sure there are no shy individuals in the audience. I'd love to field any questions as we come to the close of this briefing. I'm sure. Please. And may I acknowledge you as well as somebody who was tremendous in our PSA. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm Pat Henry, and I work in the Mayor's Office of Partnerships and Grant Services, and I know a lot of organizations that would be interested in this report, and I just wanted to know if it would be on your website.
Yes, absolutely. We are making sure that YWCA not only keeps this information for the benefit of the YWCA, but especially for the benefit of other nonprofit organizations. We took the time and energy and resources to make this a very comprehensive survey, and as Celinda can attest, we worked to make sure that this is a body of knowledge that can actually touch and also help other nonprofit organizations move their agenda forward.
And I think our city council would be also interested in this report.
I'm sure we will make that we will make that available.
Hi, this is Kirsten Stewart at Futures Without Violence. I also just wanted to say thank you so much, and particularly in the efforts to draw attention, obviously, to issues of gender-based violence, which the Y has been leading on for so long. So thank you, and we will also absolutely put the poll to work, I hope. I also had just a question for Celinda and Bob, too. The numbers around millennials and harassment and discrimination, I was surprised, but maybe foolishly. Do you think that the rates are actually higher? And is the problem getting worse, or is there a silver lining in this, which is that younger women are more attuned to the issue and are being more identifying it and speaking out about it?
So that is a great question, and I would say a couple of things. I think some of both. There's always an age effect. So I think in terms of harassment in particular, if you look at any period in the past, younger women are more experiencing that. Single women also, unmarried women. And there's a real interaction. And one of the things that I mentioned, this interaction of really looking at race and gender, is a really powerful aspect of this study. But the millennial women, thank you to those in this room, and thank you nationwide, are on steroids in terms of their concern. They define enough is enough. And 81% of millennial women, 86% of millennial women say this is a serious problem. 2/3 of millennial women say we want to take action immediately. 73% of millennial women say I absolutely will not vote for anyone who doesn't make this a priority and who has been accused of being a sexual harasser. So there is a real coming of age here. The thing that is different also is the awareness of the millennial generation, male and female, around racism. And this is a cohort that has really brought this issue to the table and said ending racial profiling. And the rest of us are just catching up, honestly. But that is a cohort that from day one has had racism and tolerance and a true deeper meaning about what that meant on their agenda. So thank you for your good question.
And also, thank you for making the statement on the work that the YWCA has done with regards to gender-based violence. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and it is the work that we do so passionately to make sure that women find a safe place to be when they have experienced cases of domestic violence. And we are the largest network provider of housing for survivors of domestic violence, which can often get lost. And as women, we're quiet about the work that we do, but the impact of the work that we do is really something that's, to me, immeasurable. And I thank those supporters of the YWCA throughout the country. Any other questions? Another one of our wonderful stars of our public service announcement. Thank you very much for volunteering to do the PSA.
No, thank you guys. I just had one question in regard to the data as well. I know that millennials were spoken to, but I know that there's kind of a difference between Generation Z and kind of their extreme. I've seen like an extreme wave of political action, even with friends that I'm like, oh, you care about politics? Okay, yes, like let's go. Okay, come on. And so I just wanted to know if any of the data reflected Generation Z.
So there is some of the data in Generation Z, but not as much. We kind of combine them with millennials, but we can break some of that data out. You're absolutely right that Generation Z is really going to take this system by storm. They're already turning their parents' heads upside down, and now they're going to really turn the country upside down. And three things that are really remarkable about Generation Z, and I think the Parkland kids were really vocal in terms of this. They are concerned about violence in all forms. They're concerned about racial profiling and the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And then they're a very, very different perspective on gender. They do not see gender as fixed. They do not see it as binary. And they're really going to change how our society views these issues. So I hope we're doing a survey in 2 years. And in that survey, we'll have an even bigger cohort of Generation Z. But we can break out some of that data for you.
Well, I know we're running out of time. I wanted to close with just a couple of things. Again, support your local YWCA. We like to say we're not new to this, but we are true to this movement. And in many ways, the services that we provide are truly those that reflect the needs of community. So we also like to say that not every YWCA has a pool, but we like to help women when they feel like they're drowning. So for us, it is a mission and a passion and something that we believe has made our community strong. I thank you so much for being here this morning. I know you all have busy agendas, but thank you. And thank you for celebrating with us our 160th anniversary. Thank you very much.